Tonight on the MTN News, extra patrols at some Billings schools as threatening calls once again target school districts across Montana.
In working with police, no one has identified that the source of the threat is a local threat.
And for the first time, we're seeing body cam video from law enforcement involved in a frightening incident this summer in Yellowstone that left one man dead and a ranger injured. Plus, voting for your candidate looks a bit different this election season if you're hoping to select someone not already on the ballot.
They need to file a declaration telling us, hey, I want to be a candidate for this particular position.
The latest on the new rules for write-in candidates. The MTN News starts right now.
From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 530 News.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Billings Public Schools and police are continuing their investigations following threats made last night against a local middle and high school. They say those threats are part of a social media campaign aimed at schools all across the country. This is something that has been happening more and more, it seems. Our Marcus Kakova spoke with school officials and families about what's being done to keep students safe.
Behind me is Skyview High School, one of two schools at the center of recent violent threats that are sounding alarms for school officials and families alike.
This is a post that has followed a pattern. In working with police, no one has identified that the source of the threat is a local threat.
Overnight Wednesday, school officials say they received word of a threat of a mass shooting at Skyview High School and Medicine Crow Middle School, something police have deemed non-credible.
Even though we think it's a hoax, we're still going to send police officers. We're still going to communicate it as a real threat.
Patty Brown, a grandmother, says her daughter kept her kids home from school, even though their schools weren't named in the threats.
She said, I don't know if it's like they've got a gun or knives or what they have. And so she was not comfortable sending her kids.
Fitting into national conversation, Marcy Brown says gun violence is top of mind.
I'm scared right now of gun violence, period, but especially when it comes to students in the nation and going to school.
A conversation that school officials say is often oversimplified.
Sometimes in the political spectrum, people go only one. It's only guns. Well, don't forget about the people, right? Or it's only the people. Well, don't forget about the guns.
Superintendent Garcia says if you see something, say something. The best thing a parent can do is bring attention to a potential issue.
If you know your child and you know somebody else's child who is making threats, who is doing, are giving you indications of some sort of violence, we will appreciate to have that information.
Issues all too common across the country.
Kids are raised with so much more violence.
It's a must that we got to get a handle on this.
Marcus Kakova, MTN News.
Yellowstone National Park has released body cam video of the shooting at Canyon Village back on the 4th of July. Samson Fussner was shot and killed by law enforcement, but not before injuring one officer. Video is from 3 of 5 officers who responded that morning. It also includes explanations from the National Park and FBI investigation. MTN's Chet Lehman shows us how that morning unfolded.
I need one of your men who's been hit in
The more than 20-minute video from the National Park Service includes body cam video from 3 of 5 responding officers. It also chronologically lays out the events of that morning of July 4th. A 911 call came just after midnight, identified Fussner as making threats to shoot up the employee dining hall at Canyon Village. He made those threats to a fellow employee. Law enforcement began searching for Fussner, ultimately finding his vehicle and some weapons. At 8:05, Fussner, coming out of the woods, encountered Officer 3 and fires at him. He then moves directly towards the loading dock, where he encounters Officers 1 and 2. Fussner fires through the doorway, hitting Officer 1. Officer 2 then moves towards the door. There is no sound on this video, but the video clearly shows Fussner and Officer 2 firing at him. National Park Service video provided also shows this in slow motion. Officer 2 then leaves, and you can see Fussner laying on the ground. National Park Service video then shows a clip from Officer 4 approaching Fussner and removing the semi-automatic weapon from him. According to the video, only Officers 1, 2, and 3 fired at Fussner. The other body cam video is from Officer 5 responding to the scene. You clearly can hear him tell residents to go back inside. And then you can hear the gunfire exchange between Fussner and the other officers. Fussner was an employee of Xanterra at the time. The wounded officer was taken to the hospital and later recovered from his injury. In Bozeman, Chet Lehman, MTN News.
The remains of 3 indigenous children from the Fort Belknap Reservation are making their way back home from an East Coast boarding school burial ground. This after those children were removed from their families back in 1890 to attend the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. A reparation delegation is transporting the remains cross-country, today passing through the Fort Peck Reservation with an official escort. It's an important historical and cultural effort spearheaded by local tribal historians and funded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Almeda Heavyhair died at age 16 in Pennsylvania of tuberculosis. She was part of the Lame Bull family line. That family tells us a convoy of vehicles is carrying the remains, which are each in small 3x5 caskets wrapped in buffalo robes.
It feels good to have her back with us here and in the Lame Bull Cemetery. She's a part of us, so she's part of our family.
A wake is scheduled for 7 p.m. tonight in Hayes, and a reinterment service is set for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Many people greeting the convoy in Fort Belknap today are expected to be dressed in orange T-shirts with the Fort Belknap logo. The orange color is part of the Every Child Matters movement that started more than a decade ago in an effort to raise awareness about the children taken away from their homelands to boarding schools. Crow fashion designer Sweet Sage Woman helped create the shirt with deep cultural meaning. Many are expected to wear the shirts on September 30th, the National Day of Remembrance for Indian boarding schools.
It was such a nice day, we thought we'd take you on a little tour around the state, starting in Helena. Sunshine, everything looks pretty green there, nice. 73 is the current reading, but the winds have been a little gusty at times at 25 miles per hour. Let's shift our view over to Missoula, where we've got a few clouds hanging around, but lighter winds. It's been a pretty comfortable day, and they've been left a little more out of the fray with the really heavy rain. For Butte, temperatures are a little cooler at 67, and there's a little bit of a breeze, and that wind is going to stick around into the valleys of southwest Montana. 71 at the airport in Belgrade. Bozeman's temperature right now sitting pretty close to seasonal averages. And here's a look out towards Great Falls, sitting at 70 degrees and sunshine. We'll take a look at the forecast details in just a few minutes.
Election Day is fast approaching, now just over 6 weeks away. But this year, some voting protocols will look a little different than in years past. The change comes in the write-in sections of the ballot, where instead of any name counting as a vote, it has to be one that was registered as a write-in candidate. Our Charlie Kleps looks into the change and speaks with a candidate who understands that new process.
When you receive your ballot this November, it's going to look a lot like this one, with bubbles next to candidates' names and, of course, the write-in line as well. But if you're planning on using that write-in line this year, you're going to want to do your research to make sure that your vote actually counts. When voters hit the polls in just a few weeks, they're going to have plenty to decide on.
Just super important that everybody has their voice heard.
Most will be the typical one Republican, one Democrat race after June's primaries, but that isn't exactly the case in the Eastern Congressional District.
A lot of my race now has evolved into becoming that top of the ticket candidate for the Democratic Party.
Democrat Riley Neal threw her hat in the race just about a month ago as a write-in candidate, hoping to re-energize Democrats in Eastern Montana.
No matter if a district is winnable or not, the people of that district deserve representation.
Her name won't appear on the ballot, but she did have to register as a candidate in case people do write her name in. And it is a bit of a process.
You put all your general information there, and then there is a large section for all the different potential spellings of your name.
One that included Neil sharing 100 different iterations of her name and filing with the Federal Election Commission so she could raise money for her campaign. That's the only way for her to receive any votes. The difference this year on ballots, though, concerns races that have no candidates listed.
Previously, the situation in which you would have counted a write-in is basically if there's no other candidate in the race who filed.
That's changed thanks to a new law in place that requires every write-in candidate to be registered. In the June primary, there were 10,833 write-in votes cast in Yellowstone County that weren't counted.
We're able to tell voters, hey, look, these aren't registered write-in candidates, so these votes, we're not going to be looking at them. People are certainly free to write whatever they like on the write-in line, but we're not going to be looking at those names unless they're a filed write-in.
A change that Aldrich and Neal hope voters are aware of, knowing just how important it is to democracy.
Inform yourselves, read about the people who want the office, and make an informed decision.
In Billings, Charlie Kleps, MTN News.
Ahead on the MTN 530 News here on Q2, Calves for a Cure. How a cattle auction is helping fund research and raise awareness about a baffling type of muscular dystrophy. And later in sports, a former Billings Central standout making quite a name for himself at the college level.